So hopefully I can get this on the first try. Usually Rob can get it on the first try. I always end up taking like 4 or 5 times. So we'll see how it goes. 3, 2, 1. Welcome everyone to the Nerdy Wordy podcast, where today we have an extra special episode in store for you. My name's Billy, and I'm going to be your main moderator and co-host, along with my friend.
I'm Rob.
And the reason why today's episode is going to be so awesome is because we got a special guest here for you. He is an expert in hypnosis, influence, and persuasion, and he's used those skills over the last 30 years to help hundreds and thousands of people be able to effectively communicate, be able to ethically influence, and ethically is the important word there, and also help people get more of what they want. You can think of how to win friends and influence people, but a more updated and more effective approach. And he's just an all-around great human being. And it's my pleasure to have on our podcast, Gladwell.
Well, that was awesome. That was awesome. And you said awesome was going to be an awesome podcast because of me. You should kind of hold that judgment off till the end.
But
thank you.
I'm sure it will be.
So when we talked, and I haven't talked to Rob at all, I just have seen you on the podcast and Billy, but we've talked back and forth on email. Mm-hmm. We talked about an AMA type of podcast, right?
Yeah.
I can do whatever you want me to do. So you ask questions or I'll talk forever, depending on what you want to do. So it doesn't matter.
I guess the first place to start would be, what is your definition of hypnosis? Because I'm sure a lot of our normal viewers probably won't be familiar with what hypnosis actually is.
Yeah, and well, if you've been to my podcast, I don't know if our podcast been to my website. I don't know, Rob, if you've been to the website, but I got the articles, tons of articles, and one of them is about hypnosis because I make a good argument that hypnosis isn't a real thing, and but then I turn around and make an argument that it is. So it depends on how you look at it, because the way that I view it, and the way a lot of people view it, is that hypnosis is just communication. It's effective communication. So if that's the case, then there's no hypnosis. It's just effective communication. That's all it is, right? And that's what I think it is. But when it comes to, like, somebody wants to stop smoking, or they want to be better at meeting other people and, build that confidence up, hypnosis is effective communication with a purpose. That's really all it is. So I could go into a room of 1,000 people and do a class for a weekend on how to hypnotize people, or I can go into the same room and teach the same stuff, but say, hey, I'm just teaching you effective communication. That's really all it is. So there's nothing. It's the way that your brain works and the way that it processes information and language. So you can go either way. So I'm okay if people don't believe in it. I'm okay if they do believe in it. And to give you an example, when I started back in the early 90s, I was working with a lot of doctors, but at that time, 80 to 90% of doctors didn't think it was a thing. And only about 10% would hire me to come in and work with their patients. But now that has switched over the last 30 years, and most doctors, I'd say 80%, think that hypnosis is a tool that you could use. But people just have a weird concept of what it is because of movies and TV and stuff like that. And also you get the stage hypnosis people, which I did for a long time before I did my mentalism show. And the stage hypnosis is all a numbers game, because if you get 100 people in the room, and I know that if I have 100 people in a room, 20 to 25 of those people are going to be the types of people that want to volunteer to be stupid on stage. I mean, do stupid stuff. And then when I bring them up, I know that anywhere from 4 to 5 of them are going to be really, really good at it. And some of them are going to be mediocre, another 4 or 5. And then the rest of them, I just sit back down. So I ended up with about 8 to 10 people on stage, 4 or 5 of them really, really good. The other ones, not so good, but they could use them as props. And that's how. So anybody, you don't have to learn I have that. I sent you a DVD on my training for the stage hypnosis for magicians or whoever wants to learn it.
Yeah.
If you just have 100 people in a room, you call them up, you don't really have to do anything. It's a numbers game. And so you just have to put on that show that, okay, now close your eyes and relax. And, your body's becoming limp and some people fall off the chairs, but it's a show. It's a show.
Yeah.
It is. But the audience liked it. And I just got tired of doing it. And I can't stand to watch one now.
Oh,
Because
really?
I know how it works, so I can't stand to watch one. So
Yeah.
so what hypnosis is, I told you it may exist, it may not exist. What I would define hypnosis, and this is how you go into, if I ever use the word during this podcast, if I use the word trance or hypnosis, I mean the same thing. All right, just so you guys know, they're interchangeable to me. So I'm talking about the same thing. So what you need, the three ingredients you need for hypnosis is you have to have a fixation of attention. All right. So that means that you can fixate on the sound of my voice. That's why also, if you watch the old movies, they have a watch going back and forth like this because they're watching and fixating on that. You can have somebody stare at a corner of a wall or where the ceiling meets, or, if you could be fixated by someone that you find attractive. So it doesn't have to be something artificial. It can, and that's why you also get highway hypnosis is what they call it, because you're fixated on the lines in the road and you're driving down. So that's one ingredient of hypnosis. So fixation. The other one is you have to distract the unconscious mind. And the reason is for that, and Billy, we sent a lot of, Rob and I haven't, but Billy and I don't know what you've shared with Rob, but Billy and I have sent a lot of emails back and forth, and we talked about the critical faculty. And did you talk to Rob about that at all?
I think a little bit, but I definitely did cover it as well as you did.
So the critical faculty, really easy. Critical faculty doesn't exist in your mind. It's it's like the unconscious mind and the conscious mind, right? Those are metaphors that people made up so we could talk about certain aspects of how we process information. The critical faculty is the part of your mind. And okay, so I should tell you this. The brain and the mind are two different things. The brain's the physical thing. Your mind is what happens in the brain. That's how I view it, right?
Okay.
So the critical faculty is in the mind. What that is a process that it's really critical. That's why it's called the critical faculty. So it decides if somebody says, the sky is always green, well, you know that it's not. So you make that critical faculty makes that judgment. No, that's not true based on your beliefs and everything like that. One that is popular is the earth is flat. Now, people go both ways on that. And I happen to think it's round. It's not flat. But for a while, my son, if he watches this, my son thought it was flat when he was in college because he was a philosophy major. And somehow they came up with the world was flat, but he's changed back now. But when you ask that, if you ask somebody, is the world flat and they believe it, their critical faculty goes, that's true. And they let it go into your short-term memory, which turns into your long-term memory, right? So that's what the critical faculty does. It doesn't do anything else. But when you distract the conscious mind, it gets rid of the critical faculty. You don't have that judgment of what's right or wrong, or yes or no, or black and white, earth is flat or round. You don't have that. You just don't question it. You let things go in. So that's when you distract the conscious mind. And so if you're talking about hypnosis, a lot of people will say, begin counting backwards in your mind from 99 by 3. So it's 99, 96, and you just keep going. Well, that's hard to do for most people. And then when they get to the end, all the way down to 1 or whatever's closest to that, I say start back over at 99. That's a distraction of their conscious mind. And so I have the fixation, not only the fixation is on counting, but at the same time, it's also distracting the conscious mind because they're thinking about that and they're not paying attention, really close attention to what I'm saying. And then the other thing that they need is to go inside. So you distract them, you fixate their attention, and you have them go inside their mind. What I mean is you don't want them looking around out here and describing things. You want them imagining things in their mind. That's the 3 ingredients of hypnosis. That's all it is. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
So hypnosis is real and hypnosis is not real.
It's a
It depends on how
superposition.
you look at it. Yeah.
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 Um,
I see. My results though. I just keep talking. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
that's okay.
I go for the end result. So if you come to me and you don't have confidence walking up to somebody you're attracted to, for example, and you want to help with that and you want to learn to do it,
Mhm,
or if you come to me and you want to lose 40 pounds and you do it,
mhm,
my philosophy has been doesn't matter if it's
mhm,
real or not, because we got your end result. You got what you paid for.
mhm.
And so that's it. So if they, and I know Chase Hughes though, you guys are familiar with Chase Hughes?
I am. I don't
Yeah,
think
go ahead
Rob
and
is.
explain
Who-
who Chase Hughes is. Yeah.
So he was in the military for a while. I don't know exactly the details, but he was in the military and he came up with mind control strategies for the military to use
And
and
this, right? That's what he's
CIA
known
to use.
for. See back here in the wall?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
the body language periodic table that he has. Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
So he has like all this really interesting and weird mind control stuff that is partly hypnosis, partly some other stuff, I think. Because
Yeah.
I don't really know exactly in detail. He has body language reading. He does just a lot of really interesting stuff.
Yeah. So his philosophy on it, and I just heard him recently. Now he's a body language expert, and that's what he did in the military. But I think he's recently new. I mean, I've been doing it for 30 years, but he's recently new to the hypnosis part of it.
Mhm,
And he says he thinks it's just a human placebo, and meaning that when you hypnotize somebody and the other person believes it, you're the placebo for
mhm,
them, and they believe it, so it gives them permission to change.
uh-huh,
And I don't know if I disagree with that. I mean, I might
mhm,
be okay with that,
mhm,
because what we're going for is the end result.
mhm. That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I know Rob had a lot of questions.
A lot.
A lot of secret. Well, I don't know if it's a lot. Rob had some secret questions for you.
We'll
Um,
be. I told Belly before you got on. I said I have no time limit, so as long as you guys want to talk, I'll talk. So whatever.
Well, Billy put a time limit on me is an hour, but as
Right.
long as like I can get as many questions you feel comfortable with as possible, then it's
Yeah, well,
it's
I'll ask
worthwhile for
Rob
me.
before you ask anything, though. Rob, I'm going to ask you: did I answer some of your questions with my definition of what hypnosis is?
A little bit,
Okay,
yeah.
good. All right.
So Billy, before I do my thing, do you want to do anything else? So that way, I don't because I know this is your guest, so I want to make sure that you're totally
What,
comfortable.
Billy? We should say how we met, right? For
that's
people
true.
that are watching, go ahead. How do we meet?
Yeah. So the first place I saw you was maybe a decade ago or so at Hilton Head, where I watched one of your shows, and then I messaged you right before I started college, and we went back and forth a little bit about hypnosis and stuff like that. But at the time, I couldn't really afford your training program and all that stuff. So then I started college, and then when I finished, I had refound you a couple months before I had finished, and then I started the podcast with Rob, and I followed you on our Instagram for the podcast, which you should go follow. And
Yes.
and then you followed me back, and I thanked you for the follow back, and then we just went back and forth from there.
Yeah, since that was probably in May or June, right, of this year that we started.
Yeah, somewhere
And
around there.
you asked me a lot of questions about, you got a free education in hypnosis over the past
Yeah,
several months.
yeah, you were
We
really. It was really nice of you.
it was emailing back and forth, but no, I like that because I think we talked about this, but
Mhm,
was it Feynman or something that you said that I when I write it down and then I also can teach it, it's more
mhm.
clear in my mind as well. So it's a nice thing for me
Yep.
to do to solidify things. But
Mhm,
yeah,
exactly.
so that's how we met. Oh, and I do a mind reading show, which I don't believe in psychics or anything. So this is just it's a mentalism show that I did in Gatlinburg and Hilton Head Island and Sedona, Arizona. So that's
Mhm.
where we met in Hilton Head Island. That was either 2014 or 15, somewhere, because I was there for 2 years until the hurricane hit. So
Mhm.
it was around there.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, which one it
One of
was.
those two. It wasn't a decade ago.
Yeah,
Making me
you're
sound old.
right.
Yeah. So,
Like
all
half
right.
decade.
So, yeah, you guys can ask anything you want to, and I'll make up an answer if I have to. I don't.
I'm happy if you want to go, Rob.
Wait, you should tell Rob what I showed you though before we started the recording, in honor of the podcast.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So he brought his Marvel socks that he owns.
Yes,
Oh, really?
I did. Yeah, I put my shoes back on now, but
Yeah, he had Marvel themed socks, which were pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
It has Captain America right on there somewhere. So,
Oh yeah,
Which is his favorite, of course.
Yeah.
And you have Star Trek in your background, Rob.
Yes, I do.
I'm going to ask Rob a question, then I'm going to ask Billy to answer the same one. So, which one do you prefer, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek.
What about you, Billy?
I still haven't seen the Star Trek, so I'm not a very.
Oh, you haven't watched any of them. That's right.
Yeah, so
I've been trying to get him to
Oh.
do it for months, and he just
still on
hasn't.
my
he just
list.
hasn't done it
I've
yet.
seen all the movies, every episode more than once. I
Yeah.
mean, I like Star Wars, but man, Star Trek,
Uh-huh.
I just like that whole universe. It's yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah, Rob is a big fan as well, so you guys could.
Well,
Go
you
back and
probably
forth.
would be if you ever watched them.
Yeah, I've been
Yeah,
told that.
Billy.
My dad's side of the family is all like, you need to watch them, and then you both have told me I need to watch them, and then I have some other people. I need to watch them.
Now, Rob, I told him to start with the Next Generation. I mean, is that a good point to start with?
Well, I told him that he should do like the original series movies, the first like 6 ones, just to
Yeah,
kind of give
yeah.
a baseline.
Oh, the
'cause
movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. The original series itself, though, it's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like
I mean,
what,
I could point out certain episodes for him to watch to kind of be like, okay, this character is this, and like this is what happens, and give a feel for it. But I feel like watching the movies kind of gives you that atmosphere that you will see more if you get to Next Generation and stuff.
Yeah, well, before you watch that, watch the Trouble with Tribbles episode on the original series, because that'll
Yep.
come up later, and,
Mhm.
and you won't know what they're talking about and it'll come up in other franchises, other worlds.
Other popular culture, I think.
Well, what do you think about the this is normally I wouldn't talk about this on a podcast, but this is right in with your podcast. So what do you I like Discovery.
Mhm.
Have you watched that?
I've only watched a couple of episodes because I just didn't get CBS All Access to watch the
Yeah.
rest. But I was like, it's okay. I know that like it's taking place during the original series, and we get like the other versions of like how we see Spock and Kirk and everything else. So
Yeah.
I watched some of Picard, so I watched that.
I
at
do like
least.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now they did. I don't know if you know Discovery. This is not really it's not a spoiler, but on Discovery, at the end of the second season, they jump like 900 years into the future.
Oh, really?
So now they can do whatever they want
Yeah,
because
basically.
yeah, that's basically what happened. So it's a good way to be able to, still have the Star Trek thing, but then be able to do other things and have other races on there. The Klingons and stuff like that. They left them behind.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, because it like stalls after like Star Trek Nemesis and Picard. It kind of like stalls within like the last half of like the 24th century. It doesn't like go beyond that. So like
Yeah.
that's what I liked about Picard, because it kind of goes beyond what happened after Nemesis and like to see what happens in the future and stuff. So
Yep, me too. All right. Well, I didn't mean to get off on Star Trek, but Billy,
That's-
that's
I
fine.
mean, Rob agrees with me. You really need to watch Star Trek. So.
yeah. I will watch it. It is on my watch list. I just haven't had a chance to
People are
find
logging
it and
in.
get it.
People are logging into, we're going to learn about hypnosis, and all we do is talk about Star Trek.
I'm sure they won't mind.
All right, Rob, hit me.
So I am not like Billy. I am a very skeptical person, just as my nature.
Okay, not to pull you away from the video for too long, but I have to point out, while I was editing, I want to make sure that you think that I'm not gullible. I consider myself trusting. And it's not that I'll just believe anything. I mean, I need to have... Ooh, I just won $1 million. I just have to go put in my banking info, and I got it. Okay, you get back to the video, and I'm gonna go get $1 million. See you guys later.
And that's why I am a physics major, and that's why I want to be a physicist when I grow up.
When you grow up,
So,
you are grown up.
well, I mean, like when I grow up into an older individual,
alright.
like I want to do more, get my master's and PhD and stuff. So,
Okay.
but I've been a very skeptical person from a very early age. So I've always been skeptical about certain things that I don't really know about. And when Billy and I first started talking about you and about like hypnosis and everything, I was kind of like, meh, I'm on the fence about it. And he was like, well, do more research, as your duty as a scientist, that should be what you should
He
do. And
put you
I'm
to
like,
work. Yeah.
yeah,
I
I mean,
did.
like, I don't mind. I don't mind doing research. I actually enjoy it, especially if it's a topic I don't really know about and I kind of want to know more about it,
Yep.
So one of my first questions I have, and I'm glad that you had discussed about, you're, saying that hypnosis is either real or not real. There's like that dichotomy that you have.
Yeah.
I have done a little bit of research into hypnosis. Now, of course, I don't believe in like the altered state theory of hypnosis. I think of it as more as the placebo, in which you have a willing participant that is willing to be, in this kind of state of mind that the person who is trying to hypnotize them places them in, basically,
What was that last sentence you said?
that they get placed in by the hypnotizer, basically.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I have this book. It's Hallucinations by Dr. Oliver Sacks.
Okay.
He's a world-renowned neuroscientist. He's now deceased. And he actually has a comment about hypnosis in the book that, if you don't mind, I would like to kind of read.
I don't care. Go ahead. Yeah.
So he says that hypnotic suggestion indeed can be used to induce hallucinations. And he says this was shown experimentally by Brady and Levitt in a 1966 study in which they suggested that hypnotized subjects that they see, i.e. Hallucinate, a moving visual stimulus, a rotating drum with vertical stripes. The subject's eyes, as they did this, showed the same automatic tracking movements, optokinetic nystagmus, it's a very hard word, that occur when one is actually looking at such a rotating drum, whereas no such movements occur. They are impossible to feign if only merely imagine such a visual target. Basically, he's saying that like if someone who is being hypnotized close to their eyes or does anything, they will visualize in their brain without actually having any kind of visual stimulus in front of them. So it shows that these individuals who are being hypnotized see and experience something that otherwise is not there for them. So my question is kind of like, is that kind of in a similar way to how, hypnotizing somebody to like help with like an issue or something, they could kind of like give a self-belief factor when they're hypnotized or in this state?
Yeah. And well, we know that people do that because we call them schizophrenic. Because they can't distinguish the images in their or images, sounds, feelings in their mind from the ones that are real. That's what schizophrenia. So we know people can do that, but yeah, you can do that, and that's the same thing that happens on stage. But a lot of them on stage are acting though, and if they're really good actors, I keep them up there. Again, I don't do that anymore, but I did. Let's talk about hallucinations though first. Yes and no to your answer. So let's talk about hallucinations since you brought that up, and then I'll tell you. And Billy might know what we're going to talk about the RAS.
Okay.
Billy. So, and did you mention that to Rob at all?
I think I tried to explain it to him, but
Okay, so I'll explain that afterwards too. So hallucinations, we all have them. So there's positive hallucinations and negative hallucinations. So positive hallucinations are just what most people consider hallucinations. That's what you see, hear, or feel something that isn't really there, right? And we all have those. I mean, cell phones, for example, you have that phantom vibrate sometime, and you reach down because you think it's there, but it's a hallucination. Basically, that's what I would consider a hallucination. You also have negative hallucinations. So negative hallucinations are things that are not there. I mean, they're there, but you can't see them or hear them or feel them. So this would be like if you open the refrigerator looking for something specific, like the ketchup or something, and you say, I can't find the ketchup, and you close the door, and then somebody walks up, it goes, it's right there in front of you. That's a negative hallucination. So that we do those naturally. And so hallucinations are a real thing. We just don't, most people don't label them hallucinations. And I'm kind of getting off track from what Rob said. So Rob, you can bring me back in a minute here. I wanted to talk about altered states. You said altered states, and you said something about altered states, like you weren't getting into them, or what did you? I can't remember what you said.
So there's two theories of how hypnosis works. Basically, it's altered state theory, in which, basically what you described as what you do for hypnosis.
Okay.
And then not altered state theory, which is what I'm kind of going to, or where you have a subject and they're basically having a placebo effect in which they believe they are feeling or experiencing something in which it's not really there, that the hypnotizer is presenting to them, basically.
Okay. So let's talk about altered states. Altered states, and this is not anything that you would read it if you got the right books, but it's nothing. Even some hypnotists don't agree with me on this, but they're the wrong ones. So altered states, let's give a definition of altered states. Well, let's give a definition of states first. So whenever you hear the word state, what does that mean to you? Either one of you.
Just like a different, experience, different type of mental faculties are at work, basically,
Yeah, and a lot of people, when they talk about altered states, they think about the videos and stuff from the 60s at what was that, Woodstock and stuff like that, from the drugs, and you can do it that way, but I don't know if you want to. But when I use the word states, I mean emotional states. That's what I'm talking about. So sadness or joy or zoned out, whatever, anger, whatever you want to, all those are states. So when I use the term emotional states and states the same way. So those are my examples of states. So I want to make sure we're on the same page. So what would be an example of a state for you? What would be an example of one?
Well, I would say, like, if you're in a drug adult state, if you took some sort of drugs or something, a schizophrenic state would also be in which you were paranoid and you believed in things that were not actually there, and you were starting to see things or something like that. Those would be the kind of states that I would see.
All right. So, what about states that you would experience personally? What kind of states?
Like, for example, sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis, it's an experience state in which your body does not wake up when your mind does. So you start to experience a different type of reality because you are thinking that you're still asleep and dreaming. And that's where you'll start to see, shadow figures in your room or something else. And, you'll think that your mind thinks that you're getting visual stimuli, but actually you're still awake in your mind, but asleep with your body. So it's not correctly aligning the two together, basically.
Okay. Yep. And that's a mental and a physical thing, because your body's paralyzed when you sleep anyways. And so are you skipping over? I'm just asking questions, so I want to make sure we're on the same page. So are you skipping over any states like happiness that you have, and maybe states of anxiety or states of sorrow or anything? That's not what you think about when you think of states?
Because it's, for example, state of anxiety, that is mental illness as well as depression. I do experience anxiety myself because I have obsessive compulsive disorder.
Well,
so
everybody. So we talked about that, didn't we? Do you have it too, Billy?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. All right. So yeah. So
Tria.
I do too. Yeah. We all share that somehow. So my definition of a state, though, is any emotional state. So sleep is an extreme state, but happiness, joy, sadness, and depression isn't really let me just clear. Depression, anxiety, those aren't really specifically mental illnesses. They can be, but you can also be a completely healthy person with no mental illness but also feel anxiety at times and feel depressed at times. So so those can still be states, but people nominalize them, right? They put them into, you know what a nominalization is?
I read in one of your articles about what
Yeah.
nominalization is.
So
Yeah.
a nominalization is any noun that you can't put into a wagon, is how I describe it. So you can put like rocks into a wagon, that's a noun, but you can't put depression or anxiety into a wagon. And so what that means is that that noun is probably a process. And so, but people that have depression and they're diagnosed with anxiety issues, they feel like it because that's what I have to do with people. If they say, help me with my depression or something, I have to come in and first I have to change that nominalization, that noun, that solid thing, that depression, to an action, to a process. So I ask them, well, how do you do depression? And then they can just describe it to me. Well, I think about this, or I think about that, or this happens, and then this happens. And so I have to get them unstuck, is basically what it is. So that's a nominalization. If you hear anybody say a noun that doesn't fit into a wagon, just ask them, what do you mean by that? How does that work for you? And then you'll get more details out of them. So, but yeah, so any emotional state, any state that you can go into, and during my since COVID set in, I'm not doing any, but during my live trainings and stuff, I have people list how many emotions that they experience throughout a week. And usually they come up with about anywhere from 8 to 12 each. And most of them are bad. I mean, because that's what people think of when they think about emotional states, and a few of them are good. But we have close to 6,000 different words in the English language that we can describe emotions as. And so, so it's kind of sad that people only describe 8 to 12, and they have to expand their emotions a little bit. But because really your emotions and the way that you act depend on the vocabulary that you have and what you can describe. So that's what it boils down to. So when I talk about states, I'm talking about emotional states. So an altered state then, by definition of that, would be any state that you're not in right now. So if Billy was behind you and you didn't know it, and he yelled and you jumped because he scared you, you would go from whatever state you're in now to a different emotional state. So that different emotional state would be an altered state from the one you're in now, by definition. Mm-hmm. Are you with me on that? I didn't say anything weird on that, did I?
No, I'm following you, yeah.
Yeah. And so what happens during that process of changing from one state to another, you drop some of your defenses. You drop your critical faculty, for example. And so if he scared you, your critical faculty would go out the window for a few seconds. And so if Billy you can do it if you want to, report back to me if this ever happens. But Billy, if he walked up behind you and scared you and you jumped, he could say, take me to dinner and pay for it real quick. Your mind is more likely to accept that suggestion because it doesn't go through the critical faculty. Because if you were not scared, or if you were not in a highly emotional state, you could say, I'm not taking you out. Your brain would go, no, I'm not paying for that. And then you would tell him. But you tend not to question things. That's why people that have car accidents or are hurt, they are highly suggestible at that point, because they're in a different state that they're not used to being in. Now, the way that hypnosis works in a therapeutic setting is that they agree to let you do that to them. They don't agree to let you scare them, but they agree to let you take them to a different emotional state. And usually I'll help people get relaxed. But if somebody comes in with anxiety, it's really hard for somebody with anxiety to get relaxed. So then I'll use confusion. And what that means is I'll talk to them and start using words that make sense, but they're difficult to follow my train of thought. And what this feels like is if you've been in a college lecture and you were watching the professor lecture, and then he just lost you on something, and you kind of zoned out for a little bit. that's how you use confusion, because when your brain gets confused, you start to try to add meaning to it, and it just shuts down because you just don't understand what's going on at that moment. So when that happens though, if somebody was sitting behind you and they recognize that you zoned out with your professor, they could start giving you suggestions. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to follow them. What it means is you're more likely to follow them, is all it means. So you can't, and then I start my book with, you can't make somebody do anything against their will, but you can get them to do something without their knowledge. And the example I use is going into a bar and walking up to a guy and said, I'm going to use hypnosis to make you buy me a beer. He's never going to do that, right? Because his guard is up. Not at all. However, if I walk up and I build rapport with him and I make friends with him, and he's laughing and I'm laughing, and I said, man, I wonder how the beer is here. He may say, well, you want one? I'll buy one for you. And he'll go up and get one. So that's the difference. Does that make sense? So when it comes to the altered state by definition is, and this is what I teach my students, altered state by definition is any emotional state that you're not in right now. So when somebody comes in and you want, for therapeutic purposes, and you want to hypnotize them, you just have to change their emotional state. If you're in a normal conversation and you're trying to persuade or influence somebody, all you have to do is change their emotional state and they become more suggestible. Doesn't mean that they're going to do exactly what you want them to do, but they are more open to what you're saying. That's all it really is. Did I answer your question at all on that?
I think you did, yeah.
Yeah, and so because you ask about hallucinations, and basically, well, you guys know, you probably know this. We're hallucinating all the time, right? Because what happens in our mind isn't really what's happening in the real world. We make a map of it. And so we could both see the same car accident and all three of us have different stories of what happened, because we're processing it in our mind and not actually seeing or hearing or experiencing what's happening on the outside. It goes through all of our senses and we make meaning out of it, and it gets skewed. And here's a little trivia for people too, is that every time you remember a memory, it gets less close to reality. And so if you remember something from your childhood, the more you remember it, it gets encoded back in your brain a little bit more screwed up. That'll happen. You guys aren't married yet. That'll happen when you get married. It's beneficial to you because it's more fun to be happy than it is to be right. So, and I have found myself just in relationships saying, I may be wrong about that. Even if it's a memory that I had, I may be wrong about that. So, so everything that our brain gives us is kind of a hallucination because we're making it up as we go along. And it comes back, it's theory, right? It comes back. You guys just did the two slit theory, or the two hole theory is what I hear. And I don't know, I didn't watch that one yet. And, but I know the experiment that happened, and in the experiment, he claimed that it's how you observe it or what you're measuring, right? Or it turns from a wave into a particle when you observe it. And that's a little weird. You have to hallucinate that in order to theorize it, I guess. So my definition of hallucination is probably different than most humans because of the profession I'm in. But and that's why when it comes to working with people, I know that they have, if they say, well, I'm 400 or I'm 300 pounds because my mom kept making me eat stuff, everything on my plate. And I've learned to do that. And I always do that. They have a film or a voice in their head telling them that's a hallucination to them. When people can't walk up to meet somebody that they're attracted to, sometimes they can tell me that I hear my mother's voice back here saying, don't talk to strangers. And I'm not able to go up and talk to them. So that's a hallucination that they have. So I'm really, I would consider those things hallucinations. Is that Are we okay with that?
I'm following you. I mean, I do disagree on what
Right.
hallucinations are.
Yeah.
Just because like I've read Dr. Oliver Sacks, and I've read that because of like emotional turmoil, or like those state in which how long you've slept, or other environmental or physiological factors, that's what hallucinations is. So
Yeah.
I,
And they may be focusing on, I haven't read his book, so they may be focusing on specific hallucinations, a specific type of hallucination. I don't know. When I say hallucinations, I'm talking about anything that you experience. And if we want to get technical with my hallucinations, it's anything that's not there that you're seeing, hearing, or touching, or something that is there that you can't see it or hear or touch it, or feel it. You're overlooking it. So that would be mine. But for example, in one of my shows, it was at a square fair. It was some downtown of some small town, and I was doing hypnosis shows at the time. And I had this guy for the next hour after he left my show, think that green leprechauns were following him around all over the place. And he believed it, to the point where the cops came up to me and said, listen, we saw your show, but you got to take this off of him because he's bothering people. So it was a hallucination for him that he was seeing it. So you can make, so that would be not, I mean, I don't know what it looks like to him. I mean, nobody does, because it's in his mind. So he saw them, he heard them, and he believed it. So that would be a hallucination for him. And I just snapped him out of it. I said, all right, sleep. And then they're no longer there. And you remember everything that happened. And then he was fine. So, but I'm not sure what you read in the book, but I mean, you read me the passage. I know that part, but I haven't read that book. I'm not even familiar with the book. So I'm going to have to read it. But so it may be a different type or different category of hallucinations that they're working on. Does that make sense? Now let's take your other. We're almost done. That's why I said we can go all night if you want. Reticular activating system. That's what I mentioned to Billy, and he said he's kind of the RAS. He tried to explain to you. You can read a whole lot about it. On my blog, you can, I guess it's a blog. I call them articles, but I guess it's a blog. On my website, I go into depth about it. But the reticular activating system is a bundle of nerves back on. It's a physical thing back on your brainstem back here, right at the bottom of it. And one of its jobs to do is to give you the important things, bring the important things into your consciousness, and kind of delete everything that's not important. So, 200,000 years ago, the important things was not getting eaten by a lion, or not getting frozen to death in a snowstorm, or getting bit by a snake. So when you saw those, that's what it would flash up, and you would pay attention to those, and you wouldn't pay attention to all the other things that you are experiencing right now, because we're experiencing just numerous things at the same time, all of us. It's coming in through our senses, but we don't really register most of them. When I first started doing this back in the early 90s, the statistic was you could remember anywhere from 5 to 7 things at any one time. And with the invention of cell phones and computers and everything, we're always distracted. And I think people's attention spans only like 3 to 5 things at one time. So the best way to illustrate this is that if you have a desktop, you have a desk, not a desktop computer, just a desk, and you have a filing cabinet underneath the desk. The desk is just big enough to hold 5 to 7 pieces of paper, 5 to 7 pieces of information, files. If you want to look at another file, you have to put one in the filing cabinet and pull another one out and lay it on the desktop so you can read it. That's basically how the brain, it's a good metaphor for the brain and how the mind works when it comes to how much information you can keep in your consciousness at any one time. And everybody's experienced or had experiences like talking to someone, and then a third person walks up and they say, hey, I got to tell you something real quick. And you turn and pay attention to them. And then you turn back to the other person when they leave, and you don't remember what you were talking about. You lost your train of thought. That's how we verbalize it. That's one of those times that you had to take something off of the desk and replace it with something else. And what you did was take the conversation you were having before off the desk and replaced it with the new one that just came up, and you forgot what it was. So somebody oh, we were talking about this, and you go, oh, that's right. And you bring it back to the top of the desk. I mean, that's a metaphor. So that's not, the brain's not filing stuff, but it's a metaphor for how your memory works. All right. Your conscious memory. So the reticular activating system feeds that to you of what it thinks is important. So things that it doesn't think is important right now is maybe the temperature of your skin. And that is something that you weren't thinking of until I just mentioned it. Now you do. Or I can say the feel of the material from your clothes on your body. That's something that you just don't think about. Your reticular activating system deletes that. You don't have to think about it. And you got tons of other things. You got your heartbeat, you got your breathing, and everything else. We just don't think about those things. So the reticular activating system is designed to give you things that it thinks is important. So, and again, like being eaten by a lion. And you were asking about hallucinations in people's minds to make changes, like lose weight or anxiety and stuff like that. That's what you ask about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I don't know. So I would call the hallucinations the things that they're seeing in their mind. If you're, let's go back to, what example can we use? Let's use an example of, let's use the example of, because I taught a lot of men and women how to date for a long time back when I was in my 30s. And their problem is that they have a problem walking up to somebody that they're attracted to, because they're hallucinating in their mind that if they walk up, they're going to be rejected and they're going to feel bad. And maybe this person doesn't want to talk to me, or they're like, I'm a creep. All of that is going on in their mind, right? And I'm sure you guys, you're old enough to have experienced something like that, probably. When you wanted to go up to talk, and it didn't have to be somebody that you're attracted to, just walk up to somebody you respect or something, and you're really nervous, and all these images of what could happen are going on in your mind. And that's your reticular activating system trying to keep you safe. Because it doesn't know that it's really not a real threat, that you're probably not going to get hit by someone if you go up and say hi, but that's what it feels like sometimes. So if you can train your brain, your reticular activating system, to change the kinds of images that it sends into your mind and the things that are said, to like, this person that I go up to is going to want to go on a date with me. And the way that you do that, you can do it with a lot of ways. I recommend, if people aren't using me, write it on the mirror or put it on the desktop on your computer or phone. Just say, it's almost like an affirmation, you know, when I meet someone, they really want to talk to me. Well, I think that's how affirmations work. It's not, they're not magical, but what they do is help. It's almost like and I did this in my article. It's almost like social media algorithm is what it seems like. So, because the more you like a certain type of post on social media, the more the social media platform will give you. And the more thumb downs you give, the less likely you're going to receive similar things to that. So as you read this day after day after day, that the people like me walking up and talking to them, or whatever you write down, your reticular activating system slowly begins to learn, oh, I need to send that message up to his brain instead of the message I've been sending up to his brain. And so it's not a magical thing. It's not going to work overnight. But if you do that like a month or two in a row, just every day, and before you go to bed, and in the afternoon, and at night, and when you wake up, afternoon and night, your reticular activating system will get to know, oh, well, this is what we need to. And so you can change your habits that way. What hypnosis does is, because at the same time as you're reading it, your critical faculty at first is going, and that is not true because I've tried it before. I can't, it's just not happening. But then the more you read it, your brain, your mind, and your reticular activating system starts to send you reasons why that's probably true, is what you're reading. And your critical faculty then, when you read it, goes, oh, I can probably do that. So it changes how you think about that. And remember, your critical faculty, I talk about them like a border guard, and I use the border between America and Canada, is that if you go to Canada, they'll ask you some questions, and they will also want to see your papers, your ID to get through, right? That's their critical faculty, if you can kind of use that for a metaphor. When the critical faculty goes down, it's like they went on lunch break and you can just go right on to Canada with no questions. And so that's kind of a metaphor in how it works. So doing these affirmations daily helps change your perception of things, and then your critical faculty will accept that at some point. With hypnosis helps get rid of the critical faculty. So there's nothing you can do with hypnosis that you couldn't do on your own, but it may take you 2 to 3 months to become comfortable with walking up to somebody. When I change your state and have you focus on something and distract your conscious mind and have you imagine things inside, hallucinate things in your mind, you learn it faster. That's all it does. So that's how I tell my weight loss clients, and I don't take too many of them anymore because I just hate doing them. But my weight loss clients used to, how long will it take? I said, well, you can pay me a whole lot of money and I'll move in with you for 6 months, and I'll make sure that you don't eat anything that you're not supposed to, and that you exercise when you're supposed to and go to bed when you need to. Or you can pay me for 2 months and we'll get it done a little bit quicker. And that was the joke I used to use with them. But that's how it works. We just kind of die down their critical faculty, and they learn faster. That's all they do. Did that answer your question at all? So, we went off on some tangents, but I needed to talk about some other things.
Yeah.
Your reticular activating system, if anybody's watching, and for you, Rob, if you're not familiar with it, because Billy said he didn't know if he described it enough, is when you buy a new car and it's a blue Mustang, for example, you start seeing more of blue Mustangs on the road, or just Mustangs in general. And it's not that all of a sudden everybody decided at the same time as you to buy a new Mustang. It's just because your reticular activating system is making you pay attention to them more, because you have one now, and it determined that since you have one, it's probably important to you. So that's why. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's how that works. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think we got to it at some point.
Yeah. So I do have another question, and it's not going to be about hypnosis.